Welcome to the Propreneur Podcast, where we help practice owners become better entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Dino Watt. And once again, welcome everybody to the Best Practices Podcast. I'm Dino Watt, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you listening in again today. And I so appreciate that you actually are here listening in and hopefully getting all the nuggets of wisdom that you need to help your practice run its best. And today I brought you an amazing expert in his field and talking about appreciation. I mean, this is the guy we want to talk to, right? This is it. So excited to have you here. Dr. Paul White is with us. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dino. I'm glad to be a part.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you here. Seriously, I read your bio, and my team, when they were putting together a guest for this, was like, dude, he's right up our alley. This is exactly what we need to be talking about. And just thrilled to have you. Can you tell everybody a little bit about you and why I say that, you know, us talking with you about appreciation is so awesome today?
Well, thanks, Dino. I appreciate that. I am a psychologist by training. I grew up in the context of a family-owned business, and that's sort of how I wound up getting this direction. Over the years, I worked with families and students with learning difficulties, and then took a bit of a detour and consulted with family-owned businesses, dealing with the family issues that are intertwined with running a business and then business succession.
What are you talking about? That never happens. There's nothing.
That's not an issue in the professional world, is it? So I've done that. And through that, along with just personal reading on the 5 love languages, which Dr. Gary Chapman wrote, and it's sold
amazing
18 million copies now. I thought, you know, maybe this could help out, you know, in workplace relationships. So I pursued him for a year and actually finally met with him and pitched the idea. We first developed an online assessment that became the Motivating by Appreciation Inventory that, you know, over, I think, 225,000 people have taken now, and it's in about 5 languages. And then built training materials, sort of train the trainer kind of stuff so people can use it themselves, and wrote the book, The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. And came out in 2011, we redid it and rewrote it, updated it this past year, came out in January of 2019. And we're pleased that it's done well. I mean, the average business book sells 3,000 copies. We've sold over 425,000 copies. We're selling 1,000 books a week right now. And it's sold more every year than the prior year since 2013, I think. So I think that speaks to, it seems to be helpful to people because they keep telling other people about it.
Well, what do you think about that? I mean, if we look at that, thinking of all the other books and how they sell and how this is just kind of almost snowballing in its effect, do you feel like there's a shift amongst leaders that they're recognizing, oh, I better get a little better at appreciating people because they keep leaving me? You know?
Well, I think that's the issue. It's the pain of either the staff turnover, you know, or a negative workplace. Or, to be honest, lots of times we're approached when people have done an employee engagement survey, and like in the Gallup one, there's a question on recognition, appreciation, and lots of times they can get the other items to move, decision making, that kind of stuff, but they can't get the appreciation one to move, and so they approach us, and I think that's there. So it's probably a combination of, you know, new way of thinking for some leaders. I think there's pain there that they realize that they've got to deal with. And one of the sort of core concepts that we talk about is that recognition isn't the same as appreciation, because about 90% of all companies and organizations in the US have some form of employee recognition. That might be as small as getting you know, either a card or an email on your birthday to something more complex. But at the same time that all of those programs have sort of proliferated, employee engagement, job satisfaction have improved over the past 5 to 10 years, and so they're not working.
Very interesting. You sent over a while, well, your team did send over some topics that we could talk about, and I struggled picking one because they were like, man, these are awesome. I love the way that you approach this, but today we're making the topic of this show, creating a positive workplace isn't about making people happy, and that to me spoke to me because it was, I see this so often with doctors who, you know, kind of, and I deal primarily in the orthodontic space, although this podcast is for any private practice owner. I see doctors who think that their job is to make people happy, and why can't I just make them happy, and why can't I just do what I want to do, and I give them bonuses and I give them this stuff. And your approach is different. I'd love to hear about some of your practical steps to building that healthy work environment.
Well, it's interesting that you sort of landed on that because, in California, I do work all over the U.S. In California, there has been, I don't know how strong it is now, but a movement for chief happiness officers. And my thought was, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard in my life. And it's not going to work because, happiness, it's tough enough for us to deal with our own happiness, right? And if you're in charge of somebody else's happiness, that's a losing, proposition because there's too many other factors, and it's their choice. It's sort of like a kid, right? You can do everything for them, and they can still not be happy or pleased or whatever. But the issue is people want to feel valued. Okay, they want to know that what they do is valued, it matters, it makes a difference. How they approach it, their skills, and so forth. That they're bringing something valuable to the team, and so that's a deeper sense. I think less sort of surface and easily changed from day-to-day moods and so forth. So, and the other part that we learned, really, I mean, when we first started, we did focus on supervisors and managers, but fairly quickly we got feedback that, hey, we want to also know that we're valued and appreciated by our colleagues and our peers. And that actually has become more and more of an issue with the younger employees, that they're less intensely focused on their relationship with their supervisor and manager or employer than they used to be. It used to be a saying, people don't leave a job, they leave a manager.
Right.
That's less true with new employees, that if they get along okay with their peers and feel appreciated and valued by their colleagues, they can endure a less than perfect relationship with their supervisor. And so we've really incorporated that, where we focus on, we want, obviously the employer, the manager to communicate appreciation to different team members, but we want to train and teach the frontline employees how to show appreciation and how to encourage one another as well.
Well, beyond just saying thank you, beyond even, as I know a lot of doctors will say, I give them, I pay them and I give them bonuses, and I'm always trying to give them stuff. Beyond saying thank you, what are some other ways that maybe people don't always think about how to show their appreciation?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, most of us have been sort of enculturated to, verbally say thanks or, give a compliment or give something. So those are really sort of the two most common, what we would call a language of appreciation used by a lot of people. But as the book title states, there's really five. I mean, there's words of affirmation, where you're using words to affirm somebody, and that can be either, orally, or it can be through writing, an email or a note. Quality time is another language where people feel valued when you choose to spend time with them, and or when they're just included in the group. That if there's a group of team members that go out for lunch and they invite you, that feels good for a lot of people. The third one is acts of service, which is not rescuing sort of a low performer, but it's really the context is when you've got too much to do and not enough time. What's something that somebody can do to help out? And that could be, help do a small task for you so you can keep focused on the big one. Maybe hold your calls or whatever so you can focus on a project, or some other little kinds of things that just show that you're paying attention, because for some people words don't get it. I mean, there's sayings, words are cheap, or don't tell me you care, show me. And there's a group of, and we've had over 225,000 people take our online assessment. And so we have pretty good data about sort of that falls out. About 46% of the people have words as their primary one. So that's the biggest group. It's still less than half, right? Time is 26% of the workforce, so about 1 out of every 4. Acts of service is 22%, so about 1 out of every 5. The next language is tangible gifts, which a lot of employers think about, but only 6% of employees say that's the primary way they want to be shown appreciation. Because I've had a number of people say, hey, if I never hear anything, nobody ever stops by, see how I'm doing, check in how I'm doing, and they give me something, it doesn't feel very, genuine. And especially if everybody gets the same thing, because the situation where it is the thought that counts, that you find out about them, what kind of coffee they like, you bring that in, you find out what sports team they follow, and you bring them a magazine about that. It's not a big deal. Bonuses, raises, all that kind of stuff, we set that aside. That's between the employee and the employer contract. And good research, and we've got over 50 research citations in our book on sort of the return of investment of appreciation for a workplace, that 5 decades shows that money isn't a good long-term motivator. It can be a good short-term motivator, but long-term it wears off. And so a lot of times you're sort of throwing money down the drain. And then the last one is physical touch, which a lot of people, sort of forget.
In the workplace.
Yeah, but really two things. One, appropriate physical touch in an appropriate way in relationship can be deeply meaningful, especially in a traumatic kind of situation. But also, largely it's spontaneous celebration. That's when we see it. I mean, it's a high five when you finish a task, a fist bump when you solve a problem, congratulatory handshake, maybe a pat on the back. It's less than 1% as far as people's primary one, but it's there. Now it differs regionally. You live, in the West and Southwest, and it's sort of there. And then I lived in Atlanta for a while, and so people do the side hugs there. Northeast, New York and New Jersey, it's sort of like this is what physical touch looks like there. Okay, it's just sort of the nod, and
So true.
But but it's there, and it can be meaningful, especially when you're celebrating. So, and one of the deals is that the reason we did the inventory is because most people don't know what else to do besides thanks, and also it's very difficult to find out what your team members want, because it's not the kind of thing you say, hey, if I want to show you appreciation, what I do. It's sort of a weird kind of conversation, and if you just try to observe them, there's really not enough data points to figure it out. And so with our book, we have a free code that people can go online and take it, and creates a PDF report for each person. And you can create a group profile for your team, because again, we want the team members to know how to show appreciation to one another, and then implement it that way.
That's awesome. So that free report, they can go just up to your website and get that?
Yeah. Appreciationatwork.com, and it's the word "at," but appreciationatwork.com has all the information about the book, the assessment, the training resources, and that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. I often recommend to my clients to have, how a lot of times when people are thinking about hiring somebody, they'll have them take these, assessments. Are you, what your DISC is, what your Colby score is, all that stuff. I'll often recommend the 5 love languages, because I know how important it is to understand with that other person. It's interesting you mentioned, how the difference that we can all be inside of one office, and even in our families, right? I love that part about Dr. Chapman's work. I often use the example of, on my scale, my lowest is gifts, but my mom's highest is gifts.
There you go.
So I can tell my mom I love her.
Store, dude. That's right.
Oh man, no, absolutely. I can tell my mom I love her every day. I can go and help her move, which I have plenty of times. But if I don't give her a card on her birthday and on Mother's Day, I totally get the why don't you love me? What are you talking about? Yeah. But the power of that, and the reason why I want doctors to do that more is, and now especially with the languages of appreciation, is because it's information data that they can now use to hack their team members when they're frustrated, going, well, what's the deal? I give everybody bonuses, and I took them on these trips, and I did this other thing, and they're not, though, focusing in on understanding. It's great that you're doing that. I love that you're doing that. I think it's wonderful that you're willing to do that. But unfortunately, as a leader, you've got to understand what's their specific language in order for them to really feel it.
And not only that, what we found originally, we just identified people's primary language, their secondary, their least valued language, which is the one that is your blind spot, right? It's the one that you don't think about, that your team members may have. But then, I had somebody say, I got this team member, his language is quality time. What do I do? And so we went back and retooled it. And when we identify a person's primary language of appreciation, then we give them a list of about 25 actions that they can choose from, because some people want to have lunch with their supervisor. I mean, in fact, one of the items is, go to lunch and talk about work. The next one is go to lunch and not talk about work, right? But I've had some people say, my language quality time, but I want time with my supervisor. They're pretty intense. I'm sort of shy, but I like to hang out with my friends. And so we help be able to identify the specific action so you don't have to guess. And the number one obstacle to applying all of this is busyness. That's what people tell us. And I get it. And so we developed this so that it's very easy to implement. And so you're not wasting time and energy doing it. You don't need to send a card to everybody. You don't need to stop by and check on everybody. You don't need to, help out. You do the things that matter to each person, and those really can make a big difference, just one small action.
So let me ask you this, out of all the research you've done and all the conversations you've had, I'm super interested, and this podcast obviously is more for the leaders. I want leaders to have more tools in their belt to use, not only to connect more with their team members so that they will want to join them in this cause they have, this vision they have, but for the leaders to feel like they're being more effective and making their job easier, not harder. Right. You mentioned the obstacle oftentimes can be the busyness, right? And so some people will say, well, that's just more for me to do, not realizing when you have those elements, it actually is going to make it easier. So where have you seen that with some of the leaders that you've dealt with?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, and what's been fun is that this is used in all different kinds of industries. I mean, in professional practices, public schools, universities, manufacturing. I just did some training, a follow-up actually with a mining company and in South Dakota, which, you think about the tough guy kind of environment, so you think this isn't going to work. They love it. In fact, the miners, they put a symbol of their language that we have on their helmets.
How cool.
But the leader said, this has changed our culture because they have a high turnover rate. And, but what makes most jobs sticky is not more money. In fact, good research shows 79% of the time that people leave voluntarily, they cite a lack of appreciation as the primary reason they're leaving.
Wow.
Money. But to your point that it doesn't take a lot to just go through it. And what's really cool, I learned over time, is that when we incorporate the colleagues and peers, it really relieves pressure from the manager, employer, that they have to do it all, right? It's not all from them, and that they empower. And so we have, this appreciation at work training kit that's takes an hour and a half online, and then you get videos and the facilitators. It's like a turnkey kind of thing, and you could do it in a half day or a series of 1 hour things so that your team learns the principles and learns about one another. And so they're giving the appreciation to one another, and it really lightens the load for the leader.
So what I love about this concept is the ripple effect so Dr. Chapman obviously started out with, wanting to help people in their marriages and understanding their love. Here you're going at it another way, going to the work environment. And when they do that either a half day program or a couple of hours program, they're not just affecting their connection and their relationship with their team members, they're undoubtedly improving the connection that those team members have with their life outside of work, with their family members, which then of course makes it better for them to come back to work and feel it's this symbiotic thing.
Yeah, you're right on target. And actually what's interesting is when team members feel valued, customer ratings go up, right?
Yes.
Because when team members feel valued, they're more likely to be cheerful and listen and actually solve a problem versus pass it off or whatever. And so the customer gets served better. And like you said, if you want to reduce stress in a family, help mom or dad have a better day at work, right? And
yes, totally.
So it's sort of a cumulative effect that, man, if you're doing this at home with friends and colleagues, it can make a big difference. Now, what's interesting is that a person's personal love language, in other words, the language that's most important in personal relationships, is not always the same as their primary language of appreciation. We've done some research, and about 2/3 of the time, 67% of the time, a person's primary love language is one of the top two appreciation languages. So it's not a one for one, but it's up there. And so, because we're different in the work setting in those kinds of relationships.
So I'm curious. I have the theory with the love languages side of things that oftentimes, especially men, will be like when they look at the 5 love languages, they'll go like, oh, physical touch, that's my physical touch. But if they take the survey,
Right.
they might realize, oh, wait, maybe that's not my thing. Because as you said earlier, you could be getting one thing from your employer, but and it's nice, it's good, it's not bad, but if you're not getting that thing that you want, then you feel underappreciated. Do you ever find that with people who take the study and take this with the appreciation, that first they're the same way? Oh yeah, well mine is gifts. Yeah, I just want the money or whatever it is, and then come to find out, well, they actually want quality time.
Mm-hmm. Sure, absolutely. And in fact, just to clarify, so if they get physical touch as their primary language appreciation, it's bogus because it's not included. What we did in the assessment is, because it was so low, it's rarely anybody's primary language. It was often their lowest. And to be honest, we had a situation where we were doing a pencil and paper at that time, that some people, I got an administrator called me and said, hey, a couple of my team members had shredded your inventory. Would you talk to them? So I talked to them, and they had been unfortunate victims of sexual harassment. And so we just felt like we're not losing much data. There's a high negative possibility, so we pulled that out. We still talk about it in the model, but as far as the assessment, it's not one of the primary ones that we look at.
Well, with even if it's not the physical side of things, I'm sure still you get people who walk in going like, yeah, I just want stuff. And then they take the assessment and it's like, oh, I really just want time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Because we get more granular about what it really looks like. I mean, do you want to hang out with friends after work? Do you want to work together on a project with somebody versus, time or whatever the gifts might be?
What's the most, this is question that's popped in my head as I'm listening to you talk. I could tell you're passionate about it. This is exciting. By the way, and how long have you been doing this? Did you decide to go into the appreciation side of things?
Yeah, since 2009. Well, I started.
Wow.
Yeah, so 10 years.
What was the impetus for you to want to get into the appreciation side of stuff?
Well, I was working with a family business in North Carolina, and I was talking to the dad, the CEO, about the transition plan we were putting in place. And I said, how do you think it's going? He said, I think it's going well. My son stepped it up. I think it's going to work. I walk across the hall, asked the son the same question, and he said, this is a disaster. It is never going to work. I never hear anything positive from my dad, and at the time, my wife and I were going through the 5 love languages. I thought, maybe this could help. And so just that opportunity and need, I'm sort of a need meter professionally. And so I saw that and it's out there, right? I mean, it's a huge issue that, people don't feel that they, leave jobs, keep looking for more, they whine and complain, and actually leads to a lot of the negativity in toxic workplaces. And we've done research and have resources on that as far as a book and assessment and training stuff, because lots of times people need to know how to survive a toxic workplace.
Well, I'm telling you, if the people listening to this podcast didn't have an aha moment right there with realizing your perspective is not the truth always, and that when you think, and when I say you, I'm talking about the business leaders, right? I hear it all the time. Oh yeah, my team's happy. No, we're a good team, really happy. And I do surveys before I go out to a client's office, right? It's a blind survey. It's 20 questions, but oftentimes I'll be like, I'm sorry, doc, I don't trust you because your perspective is skewed. Right. And we'll get the same thing. I'll be like, this is terrible. This is a disaster. These are the problems here. And it's not like they're seeking for problems. It's just that they're seeing something that the doc's not seeing.
Right.
You mentioned
because you're working with docs and professionals, and because I got a PhD, which is a kind of doc, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes the toughest leaders to work with are professionals and or very successful leaders, because they tend to they have strong views which help drive them, but they tend to think their way of thinking is right, even at a personal preference level. I've had people say, well, they don't, appreciate the party, but they should, right? I mean, it's sort of like, there's part of it is a perspective taking ability that not everybody thinks the same way as you do. I had a CEO tell me, he said, I was taking people out to lunch and talking to them, and after a while, nobody wanted to go lunch with me. He said, I thought maybe I had bad breath or something. Well, it turns out they did our work and did the assessment, and the feedback you got is people didn't mind going to lunch, but they didn't want to go to lunch and just talk about work. And that's all it was. And I think another difference that we emphasize is that, recognition, which is a good thing when it's designed and implemented appropriately, is about performance. Appreciation is about the person. That
That's a really good distinction.
Employees are, we're people. We have lives, we have families, we have health issues, and we have other characteristics that are positive that aren't necessarily related to us professionally. And we can appreciate those things even for sort of marginal performers. Now we have to differentiate that, and we help people do that. But, I was just at a place where this gal had just a delightful laugh and smile. I don't think she was the top performer, but man, she was a joy to be around. And so you can say, Meg, I love hearing you laugh. It lights up the room, and so you can appreciate and value that, even though it's not about performance. And I think sometimes hard driving leaders who focus on that sort of forget about the person aspect, and that other people are different than they are, and not everybody likes the same thing they like.
First of all, I love that point. I hope people wrote that down. You said recognition is about their performance, appreciation is about the person. And that needs to be highlighted. Everybody needs to star that, circle it on the notes that I'm sure they're taking as they're listening to this podcast. But I think that's brilliant. I also 100% agree. I found so much that, these doctors, typically they're self-starters, they're driven very well. I had a dentist call me probably about 2 years ago, a female dentist. She was frustrated, she was stressed out, and she's telling me all the problems. And at one point she says, I just wish they would act like me. I just said they would do the things that I would do. And I said, well, the reason why they don't is because they're not orthodontist. I was like, that they don't think the way that you do, and that's okay.
And the other point I make is you have to learn how to lead. If you're going to be successful in business, you have to learn how to lead people who are different than you. Otherwise, you have a bunch of little mini yous around. And you may be great and bright and yada, yada, but you need different kinds of people to have a successful team. And if you don't understand that, I don't get it, why they want to sit and chat with their friends and how that's, affirming to them. But you let them do it. You throw a party and you don't show up, My threw a party without me. It was sort of hurt me, a little bit. I'm a party guy, but they wanted to hang out, and it's good. So you want to facilitate the ways that they feel valued rather than imposing yours on everybody.
100%. Wow, I could literally talk to you all day long. One thing I have to talk about though before we get to our final questionnaire part is you mentioned your marriage a couple of times. You've married 39 years.
40, just
40 years.
40 years, yeah.
Okay, so everyone listening to this has got to realize that there is definitely a high level of EQ when it comes to appreciation when you've been married 39 years. That's amazing.
Well, my wife has the high EQ. That's the
she's good EQ and tolerance, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I'm coming up on 25 this year, and I just think that, people like you who, not 25 years marriage, and people like yourself that have really, it's not a secret, right? People are, what's the secret to happy marriage? I don't think it's a secret. I think it's a practice.
Yeah.
Right? And you obviously have done that.
And it's a commitment, and you're not always happy. I mean,
What?
Okay, sorry, I may be on the outlier.
Wait a minute. We're supposed to all be happy. If you're not happy, it's over, right? You made a wrong choice if you're not happy right now.
Actually, man, if you have not read the 5 love languages, you need to read that, because Dr. Chapman talks about, I think he calls them the tingles, and his research shows that, that feeling you get, it goes away after 2 years. Yep. And so a lot of people think, I got the wrong person, where you just got to persevere through it, and it's really a choice and action, and it comes back at times through periods, so it's good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I just wanted to point that out because I think that's a huge kudos to you, and I love marriage. I think it's an amazing thing, and I think when people have been together as long as you and your wife, there's definitely some nuggets of wisdom. We can do a whole new podcast on that one. That's awesome. Let's go through. We actually have a section of our show where we go through a few questions that are kind of rapid fire just to get your ideas off stuff around stuff. Would you be willing to play?
Absolutely.
All right. The first question is what's the most expensive thing that you think business owners are missing inside their businesses?
I think, and this is from personal experience, I think the most expensive thing that happens is that business owners or leaders keep on unhealthy team members too long, and they need to get rid of them because it's sort of like an environment can't be healthy when there's poison in it, and it just is there. So it's tough. I've been through it, but man, when you get rid of them and you just know they're not healthy, and we call them toxic achievers. They may be really good at what they do, but they're killing everybody around them while they do it. You got to get rid of them.
It's I love that because it's the reason I don't like the word staff. Staff is an infection nobody wants, right? And yet we use this all the time, and it becomes a toxic environment and infection. Staff infections can come in and ruin things. And I think that it is one of the most vital things and the most loving things. Speaking of the love languages, right? I do believe that when an employer loves their employee enough, they will be honest with them and realize it's not a fit. It's not saying that person is a bad person. They're not a terrible human being. It's just we're not a fit,
right?
And that's okay.
Yep.
It's so important, so important. Okay, so what's a book that every private practice owner should read? We'll already count 5 love languages and the 5 appreciation languages. What else?
I would say the book Integrity by Henry Cloud.
Oh, great book.
Great book. It's worth its money in the first chapter or introduction, where and it's not integrity in the sense of just being honest and so forth, but it's about coming from the word of being integrated, and that your life is whole. And he basically talks about that as a leader, you have if you're a boat, you have 2 wakes. One is a task wake, and the other is a relational wake. And some people are good at the tasks, but they chew up people along the way. Other people are good at the relational part, but they're not, focused and hard enough on the business side. And so it's a really great book. Absolutely.
So we're going to put that in the show notes. The author's name is Henry Class again?
No, Cloud, C-L-O-U-D.
C-L-O-U-D.
Yeah.
I know I have it in my, I'm a huge audiobook guy.
Sure.
So it's in my library of audiobooks, so I never get the names of authors. Great. Well, in my book, The Practice RX, I actually focus a lot on culture and team performance and how they can how that I believe is the foundation of business growth.
Yeah.
What do you think when it comes to business owners is the biggest thing they're lacking when it comes to their teams and their office culture?
The pattern I see for practice owners is they don't empower their office manager or whomever the team leader is to deal with the relational part and build into their team. I mean, there's about efficiency and yada yada and all that kind of stuff, but I see that because sometimes the practice leader isn't as involved in this as maybe we'd like. But one of the things we found in organizations, you can start at any level. So you can start underneath the practice leader if they don't want to do this, but empower, the office manager or whomever might be the relational leader to go ahead and work on team relationships. Otherwise, you're really sort of just starving your people and your team.
So true. So true. What is the number one way people can get a hold of you? Because I know there are going to be people wanting me not only get the assessment that you mentioned earlier, but is there another way?
Yeah, so the website is the best way to get the introduction, the appreciationatwork.com. And if you just email would be admin@appreciationatwork.com and write whatever question you want. If it's to me directly, they'll shoot it to me. If it's about products or process or me coming to speak or whatever, be glad to do that.
Are you on social media and all that stuff too?
Sure. Yeah, at Dr. Paul White, just Dr. Paul White, at Appreciation at Work. Facebook, Appreciation at Work, LinkedIn, Dr. Paul White, all that kind of stuff.
Cool. I'm going to connect with you right after we get done. That's awesome. That's very good. So personally or professionally, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Well, I'll stick with professional because that's sort of how I was thinking about it. And that is a really good friend that we worked together professionally. He's a financial advisor for 15 years and a little bit older than I am. And he said, don't allow yourself to get in situations where you're desperate, because when you're desperate, you tend to not make very good decisions. So you need to think ahead, and there's a great book called Margin by Richard Swinson, that we need to leave margin in our lives, both time, energy, money. Don't live to the edge all the time, because life doesn't always go smoothly. And when it goes badly, you need to have some margin, and so you're not desperate. So think ahead a little bit, and don't push the edge always, because when you're desperate, man, your options decline and tend to panic and not make good decisions.
100%. The higher the emotion, the lower the IQ, right? So, All right. The best tool or resource that you think every business owner, practice owner should be using to grow their business?
This may be a little bit different angle than what you're thinking, but I think, because I grew a successful regional practice as a psychologist, people came actually from all over the world to see me about evaluating their kids. And the thing I learned, both that and as well as the book, is that in your marketing efforts, don't solely focus or even primarily focus on direct to consumer marketing as much as marketing to solid referral sources. So like when I would test kids, pediatricians, family docs, schools. Because the issue with marketing directly to consumers is that you have to hit the timing right, and that's really difficult to do. Whereas if it's a referral source, if they're struggling with X, Y, or Z, and they're going to talk to somebody who refers. So if you're like a periodontist, obviously you'd want to focus on dentists, right? Or if it's, if you're an orthodontist, either dentists or, places, schools where,
kids would be, right?
Yeah, kids are there, and, families have money and so forth. So I find that it's far more effective to build that. And then the other part of that is to really have good SEO for your website. And there's got to be a differentiator. You have to be different in some way from the other providers. Otherwise, you're just, another Joe Blow. So whether that's personality or billing or your focus on meds, whatever, they got to be able to know that, because there's somebody looking for that differentiation, and that can really grow. So anyway, for what it's worth, it's not technical tool, but it's sort of a process.
No, that you're speaking my language right there, man, because I talk about that all the time, that people need to think different than how do I just get to the mom or the dad, or even the dentist, right? That's a big thing with orthodontists. They're trying to get the referring dentist, which is great, and that's a big practice, but there are other professions out there that also see kids. There are physicians, there are psychiatrists, there are that could easily recommend you. So love it. Love your thinking. We could probably talk on a lot of different topics like this. This is really good.
I'd love to be back if it works for you.
I absolutely would love that as well. And we will make that happen, because I'm sure there's a lot of adjacent conversations we can have about this. First of all, I just want to thank you sincerely for your time and your ability to be here and giving so much of your knowledge to our audience. And I hope that our audience appreciates it as much as I do, because I love learning from people who have tangible, I believe they are all tangible, not intangible, tangible skill sets that move the needle in business way more than accounting, way more than even marketing. I think this is so important. So thank you very much.
You bet. I'm glad to be of help.
Well, everybody listening, thank you for being here again and listening to the Best Practice Podcast. Please look up Dr. Paul White, and you'll also see all of his contact information in the show notes. We appreciate you being here and listening every week. We will see you on the next show. Thanks so much again for listening to the Propreneur Podcast. We really appreciate your support. If you haven't subscribed already, please make sure you do so. Also, if you feel like you might be a good fit for our podcast as a guest, or know somebody who you think would be, go ahead and email us at dino@dinowatt.com. Again, thanks for support. We'll see you on the next episode.